I'm Sharon Wren.
And I'm Linda Cook.
And this is QC Crime Watch. Every week we will talk about some of the crimes that have happened in the Quad Cities over the past week and follow up on some of the cases that we have followed before.
Once in a while, we're lucky enough to have a guest here today. And this week, here we are.
Here we are.
So, Mr. Cavedon, I realize we just asked you this. Could you once again tell us your name and who you are, what you do?
Certainly. My name is Matthew Cavedon, and I am the director on the project on criminal justice at the Cato Institute, which is a public policy research foundation based in Washington, D.C. I'm also a former public defender.
And tell us a little bit more about the Cato Institute. I'm not sure everybody understands what that is.
What does it do?
Sure. A common way of describing us would be a think tank. We are considered one of the nation's leading voices for liberty. So across a wide variety of different subject areas, from healthcare to education to immigration to my area, law, and particularly criminal justice, our experts put out reports, give commentary to public audiences like yours, and in my case, file briefs with courts as well to try to explain what the law should be.
And for people who don't know about the project, what is the Project on Criminal Justice?
The Project on Criminal Justice has been around for about a quarter of a century now. Our goal is to help inform the public and courts about what the proper role of criminal law should be in America, how we can protect the rights of the accused, and promote accountability for those tasked with enforcing the law to ensure that people's rights are protected even in the fight against crime.
So you've probably been busy lately. There's been a lot of legal challenges to things going on.
That is true. It is never a dull moment for a lawyer, but especially this time of the year when the Supreme Court is up and rolling. It's what my father, who was a police officer for many years, would call job security.
That's what we call it too.
Yeah, I love that. So we are interested in how crime affects the Quad City area, which is the region we're in. What do people perhaps not understand about protecting the rights of defendants? So often people are the judge and jury from Facebook, right, or other social media, and someone is accused, and then, oh, this person did this thing. They ought to, right? So keyboard warriors are always out there judging, appointing themselves as judges.
Right.
What would you say the average person doesn't understand about defending the rights of those accused and how important that is?
You know, for as much as people do play jury a lot of times on social media and in public conversations, I think one thing that people don't appreciate enough is each of us actually gets invitations to help carry out that role as actual jurors. You know, when people get that piece of paper in the mail that says you've been summoned for jury duty, there's a couple different ways that people react. Some folks really do want to get in there and do their duty. Others, it seems like it's a day away from work, it's a day away from their families, and they may be less eager to do that. One of the things that's really important to emphasize is when you're called for jury duty, that's actually an opportunity to make sure that government belongs to us, to be the conscience of the community, and to help do justice. And so I would encourage folks to think twice before just brushing it off as an annoyance. I wish that's something that more people appreciated, is it's actually an invitation to a really important part of citizenship.
And it's not something that you can just easily brush away. You forget going to the dentist or whatever, because they will come after you if you don't report for jury duty.
That's right. The government can show up and have deputies come out to your house, but I think there are positive reasons to want to do jury duty as well. One of the things that I think we sometimes get mistaken about from TV shows like CSI is that by the time that any case goes to trial, it's an open and shut matter. That all the experts have already looked at it, and the job of the jury is just to check off a few boxes and get things done. Sometimes judges and lawyers will even tell people that that's all that they're expected to do with jury duty. But I think that's underselling it. That's not the understanding of the patriots who fought for the right to have a jury trial and fought to ensure that jury trials would be at the center of how we do criminal justice. What they wanted was for the most important decisions about people's liberty, about people's freedom, and about how our government works to ultimately belong not just to judges in robes, not just to lawyers like me, but to ordinary members of the community who look at people's cases and decide what justice calls for. I think that's something that hasn't gotten enough attention or appreciation.
I think that after I've been doing this a while, and after speaking to jurors after trials, I'm always amazed at how much they've learned just by that process, even during an afternoon-long trial. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've learned from the people you've spoken with?
I think one of the things that people who've served on juries would like to feel more of is a sense of empowerment. That they really are called to bring their experiences, their judgment, their sense of conscience and responsibility into that room. I think one of the most frustrating things from having talked to people who have served on juries is that a lot of them feel like they're just handheld through the entire process and that their sense of humanity can't come in. I was talking to a former juror recently. He and his fellow jurors had a lot of concerns about a case that they were given. It involved selling drugs, but they felt like it was cut and dry and that their only job was to say, yes, we do find that this person sold drugs. They didn't know that the judge's hands were actually tied and that defendant was given a mandatory minimum sentence of 40 years in prison. They wish that they had known that and that somebody had explained to them that jurors can consider things like consequences. Jurors should think conscientiously about how our government resources are used and be people who seriously look into a case. So to come back to your point, you're right. There are folks who feel like it's a very powerful experience. I think that's a good thing for people to appreciate the power that jurors do have to carry their experiences and their judgment with them into the courthouse.
And I've heard a few people over the years, not as much recently, but when they talk about juries, they're going, oh, I'm never going to get called. I'm not registered to vote. How do they pick the people that they're going to send these jury summons to? Is it registered voters, registered drivers, just you got picked?
It varies from place to place as far as how they pick who they send out notices to, but the options that you just mentioned are how most places do it, which is either they'll look at the voter lists or at the driver's lists. Usually they're looking for people who are citizens. Other than that, anybody from age 18 up can be eligible for jury duty and can get that call. So really, I've had juries that include folks who drive trucks for a living, folks who are doctors for a living, folks who make homes, folks who are students, who all come in and participate together. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things for me. We talk about voting as a place where everybody comes together and has a say in their community. But that only comes up every few years. And when you vote, you're one of, in an area like the Quad Cities, probably one of just hundreds of thousands of voters. And when we talk about nationally, over 100 million voters, right? Yeah. Voting is important, but your individual vote sometimes gets lost in an ocean of votes. When you're on a jury, for criminal cases, usually the jury has to be unanimous. So that means that every single person's look at that case matters. I think that's a tremendous amount of power and responsibility. And I think it's a great duty to do to realize that you have somebody's life and liberty in your hands, and you yourself can do what you ultimately think is the right thing.
Now, you mentioned 25 years, right? You've been involved in this. How has, I think sometimes the nation as a whole goes back and forth, the pendulum swings right and left. How have you seen defendants' rights change, or maybe the attitude toward them change over the years?
I personally have not been doing this professionally for 25 years. I'm a little bit too young to have had that much time under my belt. Although growing up in a law enforcement family, I did have conversations like this even at a very early age. But Cato has been involved in this area for a very long time. One of the signs of hope that I see over the past few years is there are a lot of folks who want there to be transparency and accountability for how we enforce the laws. That police motto of to protect and serve should mean that communities have a say in how they're policed. That policing shouldn't be seen as something done from the outside that then comes into a community, but that it's a function of the community itself. So some of the things that the Supreme Court did a number of decades ago was make it very hard for people whose rights are violated to go to court and to be able to get in front of a jury with their claims, to be able to have ordinary members of the community, rather than judges or lawyers, make the decisions about what is right and reasonable in the context of policing. One of the really positive signs I've seen over the past 10 years or so is there is this sense that the community has a role to play, that more cases should go to trial, that some of these barriers and legal doctrines that keep cases from getting to that point may be ripe for revisiting, that there might be opportunities to rethink them. Because a lot of people are honestly asking, why isn't it that we have a say when the rubber hits the road as far as how police behave and who gets to have remedies when their rights are violated?
One thing that I noticed, slightly off the topic of juries, but in your biography it says that one of your areas of focus is mass adjudication. Can you explain what that is and how it differs from a class action lawsuit? Because honestly, to me, they sounded kind of similar.
Absolutely. What we mean when we say mass adjudication is actually not like a class action suit where we're putting a whole bunch of people's lawsuits together. What we mean by mass adjudication is a lot of folks may not know that jury trials at this point are actually a very, very small percentage of how criminal cases get worked out. At the state level nationwide, only about 3 or 4% of cases go in front of a jury. The rest of convictions come from what are called plea deals, where the government offers somebody less punishment in exchange for them pleading guilty and giving up their right to go to trial. Now, we're about to celebrate America's 250th anniversary this summer, right? July 4th, 2026. The founders of this country did not think that the right to go to a trial with a jury was the sort of thing that should be treated as a bargaining chip that defendants could give up for lighter sentences. They saw it as a prerequisite, as a requirement for somebody's liberty to be taken away. And so when we're talking about mass adjudication, we mean, how did we get to the point where we're in a factory line, where convictions are just worked out behind closed doors and reported to courts like they're a done deal, rather than resolved through members of the community looking at people's cases and deciding what's just?
We must be an anomaly here because we go through the court records and they will, they have the preliminary hearing and all those other dates, and then it will say jury trial, jury trial. Very few non-juries.
Once in a while, there will be a bench trial.
Yes.
Could you explain why a defendant might select that? We've sat in on those, but we do sit in on a lot of jury trials.
Yeah.
Defendants do have the ability to choose what's called a bench trial instead of a jury trial, and that just means that you're going to have a trial by the judge rather than by members of the community. So long as defendants are freely choosing that, that's their prerogative, and sometimes, speaking as a former public defender, that can make sense. There are cases where a defendant might have a really good legal argument for why they shouldn't be found guilty, even if the facts are controversial or have a bad appearance to them. Sometimes juries might feel like somebody should get their just desserts, even if the law doesn't necessarily require that, whereas a judge might be able to look with a more level head and hopefully have the kind of neutrality that we try to pick judges for, and look at the case more just in terms of the law. So that can be a reason why defendants opt to have that. But to come back to your point about calendars, it's true you'll see a lot of calendar weeks marked off for trials. But if you take a look at how many different pleas are taken by a court any given week, cases that don't even go to trial at all, that's where the vast majority of convictions come from.
We should figure that out sometime.
Yeah, we should. What percentage and
percentage.
how many a year? You're right. It'd be really interesting. I'm going to go back to the Cato Institute
yes.
just for a moment. Could you tell us a little bit about its history? Because I'm so interested in this, and how people can find out more about the Cato Institute itself.
Absolutely. The Cato Institute as a whole has been around for now 50 years, and Cato has been at the forefront of a lot of public discussions around everything from foreign relations to budget issues. Cato is headquartered in Washington, D.C., but fortunately for folks like me who actually live outside of that area, a lot of our resources are available online. So if folks go to cato.org, that's cato.org, they can find everything from videos of events at the Cato Institute to reports written by scholars. There's a criminal justice section to the website, and we're going to be coming out with some more educational materials soon, especially for folks who might wind up serving on juries. In addition, we have a blog, Cato at Liberty, that you can find right there on the website. And we do a magazine as well called Free Society that folks can sign up for, along with a number of email newsletters.
Now, is Cato an acronym like NASA, or was there a Cato?
We get that a lot, and your viewers may know that there's a similarly named fashion chain out there as well. We are actually named for a Roman statesman who was a champion of liberty. His name was adopted by one of the early colonial era writers who was commenting on the proposed Constitution of the United States. So he wrote anonymously using the pen name Cato in honor of that ancient Roman. So it's actually not an abbreviation. It's a way of us paying honor to America's history and tradition of liberty.
Oh, that's a better story.
It's a great story. Is there anything, as an attorney affiliated with this group, that you would like to tell people? This is kind of just a general overall viewer, something maybe that people don't understand, or a question you get a lot of.
That's a really good question. I think one of the main takeaways I would like people to understand is something that hopefully was at the heart of civics education back in the day, but maybe doesn't feel like it when you're reading the news most days. The government should belong to us, we the people. And so when you see something that feels wrong, speak up on it, protest, write letters to the editor. And when you get the invitation to weigh in, especially something like jury duty, respond to that, not as a burden of doing somebody else's job for them, but as a way of taking business, public business, into your own hands. The government does belong to us. We should be involved. We should ask questions. It's not that government should be hindered from doing the important work that it has to do, but it should do so in a way that follows the same law that the rest of us have to follow. Nobody, whether they're a judge or a lawyer like me or a police officer or anybody else, should be above the law. And nobody should be beyond or below the law either, even if they're accused of, say, committing a crime.
Well, you mentioned, going out and protesting, and that can be a little adventurous these days. Do you have any general legal suggestions for how to keep yourself out of as much trouble as possible while you express your First Amendment rights?
You're absolutely right that it can be a dangerous thing these days. Unfortunately, talking about that mindset of making police into an outside force mentality, a lot of police and especially federal agents do have camouflage and body armor and military weapons and armored vehicles and all these kinds of things. And I think it can send the wrong message when folks go out to exercise their rights and that's what's out on the streets. There's an important case to be made for asking why. Why do we need that kind of force in ordinary community settings? Of course, public safety is important, but I think we do need to turn down the temperature in this country some, and that is a concern. As far as folks who do want to exercise their rights, one of the most important changes over the past few years has been the availability to record things, to get out a camera, to have sound going, so that later on somebody else who wasn't on the scene can see what happened. It's very, very helpful for a lawyer, especially, to be able to have eyes and ears on the ground. Everybody likes to say he said, she said can be a real problem. Smartphones can be a really good way of leveling the field and trying to get at what actually happened. So I would definitely recommend that. Otherwise, I do recommend being respectful and peaceful. If an officer does make an unreasonable demand, for safety's sake, for everybody's sake, it is usually best to comply with that and try to get somebody to witness or record it and then take it up through the court systems later on, rather than resisting or trying to flee or something that could put other people in danger. But it is a part of our American heritage. It is part of what makes government belong to us, to be able to say, no, we don't agree with this, or please do this differently. That is a cherished freedom. And it shouldn't be the kind of thing that is met with surveillance, spying, intimidation, pressure. It shouldn't be seen as a bad thing to get out there peacefully with other people and express oneself on the issues of the day.
We can't thank you enough.
No.
We may tap into your expertise as several court cases that we're following are heating up in the next few months. We thank you for your time,
Right.
for sharing the information you have, for talking to us about Cato.
Your expertise, everything.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. So just to recap, next time you get a jury notice in the mail, see it as an invitation to be the conscience of the community. Next time that you see the government doing something that doesn't line up with how you think it should be done, do something, say something. And if you want more information about any of these things, check out cato.org, and hopefully I'll be back here on QC Crime Watch again.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for said QC Crime Watch this week. Join us next time when we talk more about the crimes that make the Quad Cities lock their doors at night.
At least we hope you lock your doors and your cars.
Yes.